Welcome, time travelers. Sola Tales here, and tonight's adventure takes us to medieval woodlands, painted gold and crimson, where a young page carries gentle messages between two friendly castles on paths carpeted with fallen leaves. So dim the lights, sit back, and relax. The afternoon sun cast long golden fingers through the stone archways of Castle Thornfield, where autumn had already begun painting the ivy-covered walls in shades of amber and rust. Young Edmund stood in the castle's main courtyard, his leather satchel resting against the worn stone steps as he carefully checked the precious contents within. 3 sealed parchments lay nestled inside, each bearing the wax seal of Lord Thornfield, gentle messages for their allies at Castle Millbrook, carried as they had been for countless seasons past. The castle cook, a round and cheerful woman named Marta, emerged from the great kitchens carrying a small cloth bundle that filled the autumn air with the sweet scent of honey and warm spices. "Fresh honey cakes for your journey, young Edmund," she said with a maternal smile, tucking the bundle carefully into his satchel alongside the parchments. Still warm from the ovens and wrapped in clean linen to keep them soft until evening, Edmund thanked her with the easy courtesy of youth, his voice carrying the gentle accent of these peaceful lands. At 17, he had made this journey between the friendly castles dozens of times, through spring rains and summer heat, winter snows and autumn mists. Each season brought its own quiet beauty to the woodland path that connected the two strongholds, but autumn held a special magic that never failed to fill his heart with contentment. The stable master, old Henrik, led Edmund's mare from the warm shadows of the stables. Rosalind was a gentle chestnut horse with kind dark eyes and a patient temperament perfectly suited to carrying messages through peaceful countryside. Her coat gleamed with careful brushing, and her tack was polished leather, worn soft by years of faithful service. Henrik checked the saddle's girth one final time, his weathered hands moving with the practiced efficiency of decades spent caring for castle horses. "She's ready for you, lad," Henrik said, offering Edmund the smooth leather reins. "The weather holds fair, and the path is clear of fallen branches after yesterday's wind. You'll reach Millbrook well before the supper hour." A small group of castle folk had gathered in the courtyard to see Edmund off, as was their gentle custom. The seamstresses paused in their mending to wave farewell, their smiles warm in the golden afternoon light. A young kitchen maid offered a small skin of fresh water from the castle's well, the leather still cool and damp from the stone depths. The blacksmith's apprentice nodded his respect, his leather apron still bearing the marks of honest labor at the forge. This was the rhythm of life at Castle Thornfield. Peaceful routines carried out with quiet care. Neighbors looking after neighbors in the gentle way that had sustained these lands for generations beyond counting. Edmund felt the familiar comfort of being part of something larger than himself, a living tapestry of small kindnesses and shared purpose that made even the humblest tasks feel meaningful. He swung easily into Rosalind's saddle, settling his weight with the natural grace of one born to riding. The mare's ears pricked forward with quiet enthusiasm, for she too knew this path well, and took pleasure in the gentle journey ahead. Her hooves rang softly against the cobblestones as they made their way towards the castle gates, where the afternoon shadows were beginning to lengthen across the ancient stones. The great wooden gates of Castle Thornfield stood open wide, their iron hinges well oiled and silent. The guards offered cheerful farewells as Edmund and Rosalind passed beneath the stone archway, emerging into the countryside that stretched golden and peaceful under the autumn sun. Behind them, the castle's towers rose against the pale sky, pennants fluttering gently in the soft breeze that carried the scent of wood smoke and the last roses of the season. The road beyond the castle gates was packed earth worn smooth by countless travelers, bordered on both sides by ancient stone walls that had stood since time immemorial. Wild roses still bloomed along these walls, their pale pink petals scattered by the autumn wind like nature's own confetti. Hawthorn trees, heavy with red berries, provided perches for small birds who sang their evening songs, filling the peaceful air with gentle music that seemed to match the rhythm of Rosalind's unhurried steps. As they traveled further from the castle, the cultivated lands gradually gave way to wilder country, where ancient woods pressed close to the roadway and streams bubbled unseen through stands of oak and ash. Edmund breathed deeply of the crisp autumn air, tasting the hint of wood smoke that drifted from distant cottages and the clean sweetness of leaves beginning their slow transformation from green to gold. The path that led to Castle Millbrook branched away from the main road at an old stone marker carved with symbols weathered smooth by centuries of wind and rain. This was where Edmund's true journey began, leaving the broader way traveled by merchants and pilgrims to follow the more intimate woodland trail that connected the two friendly castles. The marker stone bore no inscription that modern eyes could easily read, but it had guided travelers for so long that it seemed to radiate a sense of welcome and safe passage. Rosalind turned onto the forest path with the easy familiarity of long custom, her hooves making soft whispers against the fallen leaves that already carpeted the narrow way. The trees closed gently around them, creating a natural cathedral of living pillars that soared high overhead, their branches interwoven in patterns of incredible complexity and beauty. Golden sunlight filtered down through the canopy in shifting beams that danced and played across the forest floor like nature's own stained glass windows. The woods in autumn held a magic that Edmund never tired of experiencing, a sense of peaceful transformation that spoke to something deep within the human heart. The great oaks that had stood here since before the castles were built spread their ancient arms in gestures that seemed to embrace the entire world, their leaves turning from summer green to the rich golds and ambers that made the very air seem to glow with warmth. Maple trees added their own brilliant contribution to the seasonal symphony, their leaves ranging from pale yellow to deep crimson, creating splashes of color so vivid they seemed almost to sing with joy. As Edmund and Rosalind made their way deeper into the peaceful woods, the sounds of the outside world faded away, replaced by the gentle music of the forest itself. Leaves rustled softly overhead as squirrels went about their autumn business of gathering acorns and hazelnuts for the winter months ahead. Their quick movements sent occasional showers of leaves spiraling down through the golden air, each one following its own graceful path to join the growing carpet beneath the horses' hooves. A stream ran alongside the path for much of the way, its water running clear and cold over smooth stones that had been polished by countless seasons of patient flow. The sound of moving water provided a constant, soothing accompaniment to their journey, sometimes loud where the stream tumbled over small rocky falls, sometimes barely audible where it pooled in quiet eddies that reflected the golden canopy above like natural mirrors. Edmund found himself humming an old ballad as they traveled, one his grandmother had taught him in childhood, about knights and ladies and quests that always ended in peaceful resolution. His voice blended naturally with the forest sounds, adding one more gentle note to the woodland symphony that had been playing here since time began. Rosalind's ears flicked back occasionally to catch the familiar melody, her pace settling into a rhythm that matched the ancient tune. The path wound gently through the forest, following the natural contours of the land in the way of roads that had been walked for generations before anyone thought to force straight lines through the living landscape. Sometimes it climbed gentle slopes carpeted with ferns that rustled like silk in the afternoon breeze. Sometimes it descended into cool hollows where moss grew thick and soft on fallen logs and standing stones. Everywhere there were signs of autumn's peaceful progress: berries ripening on wild bushes, mushrooms emerging from the rich forest floor, spiderwebs jeweled with dew that caught the slanting sunlight like nature's own embroidery. As the afternoon advanced and the shadows grew longer, Edmund began to notice the subtle changes that marked the deeper progress of the season. The air carried a sharper edge now, clean and crisp, in a way that spoke of approaching winter, though still weeks away. The scent of fallen leaves mingled with the earthy smell of rich soil and the green fragrance of moss and ferns. Somewhere in the distance, a woodpecker drummed against dead wood with steady rhythm, and the calls of migrating birds drifted down from the vast sky above the forest canopy. About halfway through their journey, Edmund and Rosalind came to a place where the path crossed the stream on an ancient stone bridge, its arches worn smooth by weather and time, but still strong and sound after centuries of faithful service. This was their traditional resting place, a peaceful spot where generations of travelers had paused to refresh themselves and their mounts before continuing on their way. Edmund dismounted with easy grace, his boots making soft sounds against the moss-covered stones of the bridge. The stream burbled gently beneath the ancient arches, its voice carrying notes of contentment that seemed to speak of endless patience and the quiet joy of fulfilling one's purpose in the grand design of things. He led Rosalind down to the water's edge, where the bank was worn smooth by countless hooves, and the mare drank deeply of the clear, cold water, while Edmund stretched his legs and breathed deeply of the autumn air. From his satchel, he retrieved one of Marta's honey cakes, still faintly warm and fragrant, with spices that spoke of hearth and home and the careful love that went into all good cooking. He broke it in half, eating his portion slowly while savoring the sweet taste of honey and the subtle warmth of cinnamon and nutmeg. The other half he offered to Rosalind, who accepted it with gentle lips and evident pleasure, her eyes half closing in contentment as she savored the unexpected treat. The forest around their resting place seemed to hold its breath in peaceful silence, as if all the woodland creatures recognized this as a sacred moment of rest and renewal that deserved their quiet respect. Somewhere overhead, leaves whispered secrets to each other in voices too soft for human ears, while the stream continued its eternal conversation with the stones that had listened to its voice for countless generations. Time seemed to slow and stretch like honey in the golden light, each moment perfect and complete in itself. After their brief rest, Edmund helped Rosalind drink once more from the stream, then led her back up to the path, where he swung easily into the saddle once again. The mare stepped forward eagerly, refreshed by their pause, and ready to continue the gentle journey toward their destination. As they left the stone bridge behind, Edmund looked back once at the peaceful scene, storing its beauty in his memory, alongside all the other moments of quiet perfection that made these journeys so much more than simple tasks to be completed. The path ahead wound deeper into the heart of the ancient woods, where the trees grew even taller, and the canopy overhead created a cathedral of living architecture that had stood since long before human hands began to shape stone into castles and churches. Here the silence was deeper, more profound, broken only by the soft sounds of their passage and the gentle creaking of ancient wood as the great trees swayed in the afternoon breeze. The very air seemed thick with peace and the accumulated wisdom of centuries, as if the forest itself had become a repository of all the quiet moments and gentle thoughts that had passed through its shadows. Edmund found his humming growing softer and more intermittent as the forest's profound tranquility settled into his bones, replacing the need for human music with something deeper and more fundamental. The rhythm of Rosalind's steps became a meditation in itself, each hooffall marking another moment of peaceful progress along paths that had known the feet of countless travelers, all drawn by the same simple human need to connect with others across the wild spaces that separated communities. Autumn mushrooms had begun to appear along the path, pushing up through the rich carpet of fallen leaves like small miracles of persistence and hope. Some were tiny things, no bigger than thimbles, while others spread their caps wide enough to shelter field mice from autumn rains. Edmund had learned their names from old Henrik, who knew the woods as well as any man alive. Honey mushrooms glowing golden in the dappled light, oyster mushrooms growing in elegant brackets on fallen logs, and the occasional fairy ring of small white mushrooms that seemed to have been placed by invisible hands to mark spots of particular magic and wonder. The deeper they traveled into the woodland heart, the more Edmund felt the gentle weight of history settling around them like a comfortable cloak. These paths had been walked by his predecessors for generations, young men and women carrying messages between the friendly castles, maintaining the bonds of alliance and mutual support that had kept these lands peaceful through all the changing seasons of human endeavor. Each stone marker, each familiar bend in the path, each ancient tree that stood sentinel beside the way, all of them were witnesses to countless such journeys, and all of them seemed to offer their silent blessing to yet another peaceful mission carried out in the gentle spirit that had always characterized these lands. As the afternoon light began to take on the deeper, more golden quality that marked the approach of evening, Edmund began to catch glimpses of smoke rising from the chimneys of Castle Millbrook through the gaps in the forest canopy ahead. The sight filled him with the warm anticipation of arrival and welcome, the pleasant knowledge that his journey was nearly complete, and that friendly faces and comfortable rest awaited at its end. Rosalind seemed to sense it too, her ears pricking forward with renewed interest, and her pace quickening slightly with the eager anticipation of a well-earned rest in warm stables with sweet hay and cool water. The path began to widen as they approached the edge of the forest, passing through clearings where wildflowers still bloomed in sheltered spots, and where the autumn sun fell unfiltered on meadows beginning their slow transition toward winter dormancy. Here they encountered other travelers on the final approach to Castle Millbrook. A farmer leading a cart loaded with the last harvest of root vegetables, his weathered face creased with the satisfaction of work well done. A family of pilgrims walking with quiet dignity towards some distant shrine, their simple clothing clean and well mended, despite the long miles behind them. A merchant with a small pack train of mules carrying goods that would bring comfort and convenience to the castle folk through the coming winter months. All of these fellow travelers recognized Edmund as the Thornfield page, offering friendly greetings and brief exchanges of news about the roads and the weather, and the small happenings that made up the daily fabric of life in these peaceful lands. Their voices carried the warmth of human fellowship and the shared understanding that they were all part of something larger than themselves, all playing their parts in the great continuing story of communities that supported each other through mutual respect and genuine care. The trees began to thin as they approached the edge of the forest, giving way to the cultivated lands that surrounded Castle Millbrook, like a gentle embrace of human care and stewardship. Fields of grain had been harvested and stood in neat stubble that caught the golden evening light like a vast carpet woven from threads of amber and gold. Apple orchards, heavy with fruit, perfumed the air with the sweet scent of ripening harvest, while gardens still green with late vegetables spoke of the careful planning that ensured fresh food through the changing seasons. Castle Millbrook itself began to come into view as they crested a gentle rise in the path, its towers and walls rising gracefully from a small hill that commanded pleasant views across the surrounding countryside. Unlike the more martial appearance of some strongholds, Millbrook had been built with an eye toward beauty as well as defense. Its stones fitted with such skill that the walls seemed to grow naturally from the hill itself. Gardens cascaded down the slopes in terraced arrangements that would be spectacular in spring and summer, and even now in autumn showed the careful hand of gardeners who understood the art of working in harmony with the natural world. Warm light began to glow in the castle's many windows as the household prepared for the evening meal, and thin columns of smoke rose straight up in the still air from chimneys that spoke of hearth fires and kitchens busy with the preparation of wholesome food. The sight filled Edmund with the deep contentment that came from approaching a place where he knew he would be welcomed not just as a messenger bearing important parchments, but as a friend whose arrival would be genuinely celebrated by people who cared about his welfare and took pleasure in his company. The final approach to Castle Millbrook took them along a broad avenue lined with ancient oak trees whose branches met overhead to form a natural archway that had welcomed countless visitors over the centuries. The oaks were magnificent specimens, their trunks so massive that it would take several people holding hands to encircle them, their branches spreading wide enough to shelter entire households beneath their protective embrace. Now, in the full glory of autumn, their leaves created a canopy of gold and amber that filtered the evening light into something magical and otherworldly, as if the very air itself had been transformed into liquid sunshine. Other travelers shared the avenue with Edmund and Rosalind, all moving at the unhurried pace that characterized life in these gentle lands where no one saw any benefit in rushing toward destinations that would still be there when they arrived. A group of musicians with instruments slung across their shoulders walked with the easy gait of those accustomed to long journeys, their voices raised in quiet harmony as they practiced songs for the evening's entertainment. A tinker with his cart of small useful things rang his bell with gentle rhythm, announcing his presence to any who might have need of his services. Children from the nearby village ran alongside the avenue, their laughter bright as silver bells in the golden air, their faces flushed with the innocent joy that came from living in a world where childhood could unfold in safety and peace. As they drew nearer to the castle gates, Edmund could see the familiar figures of the guards who had welcomed him on so many previous visits. Men whose faces were weathered by years of honest service, but who still found genuine pleasure in greeting friends and ensuring that all who approached their walls were properly received according to their station and their need. These were not grim warriors preparing for battle, but rather guardians of hospitality, whose primary duty was to ensure that the ancient traditions of welcome and protection were maintained in all their proper dignity. The great gates of Castle Millbrook stood open wide in the time-honored gesture of a fortress that had nothing to fear from the world beyond its walls, a stronghold whose greatest strength lay not in the thickness of its stones, but in the network of friendships and alliances that had been built through generations of consistent kindness and mutual support. The gates themselves were masterworks of the carpenter's and blacksmith's arts. Their oak timbers bound with iron, worked into patterns of leaves and vines that seemed to celebrate the harmony between human craft and natural beauty. As Edmund and Rosalind passed beneath the stone archway of the gatehouse, they were greeted by the warm voices of guards who had come to know them well over the seasons of their regular journeys. These men asked after Edmund's health and the welfare of the folk at Castle Thornfield with the genuine interest of friends rather than the formal courtesy of strangers, and their faces lit with pleasure when he shared news of mutual acquaintances and the small happenings that connected the two communities in bonds of ongoing friendship and concern. The castle's main courtyard opened before them like a stage set for a play about the ideal of feudal life, its cobblestones worn smooth by centuries of faithful service, but still sound and level beneath the feet of horses and humans alike. Stable boys appeared as if by magic to take charge of Rosalind, their gentle hands already reaching for her bridle, with the practiced competence of those who understood that caring for travelers' mounts was not mere duty, but sacred hospitality that reflected the honor of their lord and their community. Other castle folk began to emerge from doorways and passages, drawn by the natural human curiosity that greets the arrival of any traveler bearing news from the wider world. Kitchen servants paused in their preparations for the evening meal to offer quiet greetings and genuine smiles of welcome. Ladies in waiting looked down from windows with faces bright with interest and the pleasure that comes from seeing familiar friends arrive safely after their journey through the autumn woods. Even the castle's children appeared, their eyes wide with the innocent excitement that transforms any arrival into a small adventure worthy of their full attention. Lord Millbrook himself emerged from the great hall, his face creased with the kind of smile that comes only from genuine pleasure in another's company. This was a man who understood that the bonds between neighboring castles were maintained not through grand gestures and formal ceremonies, but through the accumulation of countless small courtesies and the consistent demonstration of mutual respect and care. He greeted Edmund not as a superior receiving a subordinate, but as a friend welcoming another friend into his home with all the warmth that such friendship deserved. The parchments that Edmund had carried so carefully through the autumn woods were received with appropriate ceremony, but also with the easy familiarity of communications between allies who trusted each other completely and who found pleasure in maintaining their connections through the regular exchange of news and thoughts and mutual expressions of goodwill. These messages would be read carefully and answered thoughtfully, but they were as much about preserving friendship as they were about conducting any business that might exist between the two communities. As the evening light began to fade from the western sky and the first stars appeared like gentle guardians above the castle walls, Edmund found himself settled in the great hall beside a hearth where logs burned with steady warmth, and the gentle crackling that spoke of home and comfort, and the end of successful journeys. Kitchen servants appeared with steaming bowls of mulled cider that filled the air with the scent of apples and cinnamon and cloves, and with trenchers of fresh bread, still warm from the ovens and golden with the butter that spoke of careful churning and the abundance that came from well-tended dairy herds. The hall filled gradually with castle folk finishing their daily tasks and gathering for the evening meal, their voices rising and falling in the comfortable patterns of conversation between people who knew each other well and who took pleasure in each other's company. Musicians tuned their instruments with care, preparing to provide the gentle entertainment that would accompany the meal and help transform simple nourishment into a celebration of community and shared prosperity. Edmund found himself drawn into conversations that ranged over all the small but important matters that connected their communities. News of successful harvests and marriages planned for the coming spring, reports of new foals born in the castle stables, and craftsmen whose work was particularly fine, stories of traveling merchants who had passed through with interesting goods, and pilgrims whose tales from distant lands had entertained the hall on previous evenings. These were the threads from which the fabric of peaceful life was woven, each conversation strengthening the bonds that held their world together in harmony and mutual support. As the evening deepened around the ancient walls of Castle Millbrook and the meal progressed through its leisurely courses, Edmund felt the familiar contentment that came from being exactly where he belonged at exactly the right time, surrounded by people who valued the same things he valued and who understood that the greatest adventures were not always those that involved danger and conflict, but often those that simply involved the patient nurturing of friendships and the consistent demonstration of human kindness across the seasons of life. The musicians began to play songs that had been passed down through generations, their melodies carrying the accumulated wisdom and joy of countless evenings just like this one, when communities gathered to share food and fellowship, and to celebrate the simple miracle of human beings choosing to care for each other rather than to compete and struggle for dominance. The music seemed to weave through the conversations and the gentle laughter like a golden thread, binding everything together in a tapestry of peace that felt as solid and enduring as the castle stones themselves. Outside, the autumn night settled gently over the countryside like a soft blanket drawn up by caring hands, and the stars took their positions in the vast sky with the same faithful regularity that had marked the passage of countless seasons before this one, and would continue long after all the current inhabitants of these peaceful lands had passed into memory and legend. But inside the great hall of Castle Millbrook, time seemed to slow and stretch, like honey in the warmth of the fire, each moment perfect and complete in itself, each conversation a small gift exchanged between friends who understood that such evenings were the true treasure that made all the work and worry of daily life worthwhile. As the evening advanced and the fire burned lower in the great hearth, casting longer shadows that danced across the ancient stones like memories made visible, Edmund found his thoughts turning naturally toward rest and the peaceful sleep that awaited him in the comfortable chamber that had been prepared for his stay. Tomorrow would bring the gentle return journey to Castle Thornfield, another opportunity to travel through the autumn woods and to carry messages of friendship and mutual support between communities that had chosen cooperation over conflict and kindness over mere expedience. But for now, in this moment that felt suspended between the day just past and the day yet to come, all was perfect peace and contentment, surrounded by the warmth of genuine friendship and the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing that one's life is being spent in service to things that truly matter: the preservation of communities that care for their members, the maintenance of bonds that connect rather than divide, and the patient cultivation of the kind of world where children can grow safely and young people can carry messages through peaceful woods without fear or anxiety, knowing that they travel between destinations where they will be welcomed as friends and valued as essential parts of a larger human story that has chosen love over fear and cooperation over competition. The castle settled gradually into its nighttime rhythms as folk finished their conversations and made their way to comfortable chambers where soft beds waited beneath warm coverlets, and where the gentle sounds of a peaceful community at rest would provide the perfect accompaniment to dreams of continued friendship and mutual prosperity in the seasons yet to come. Edmund's mare rested comfortably in the castle stables, well fed and brushed until her coat gleamed in the lantern light, surrounded by the sweet scent of fresh hay and the quiet nickering of other horses who had also completed their day's work and earned their rest through faithful service. And so the autumn night embraced Castle Millbrook and all who dwelt within its walls, holding them safe in the ancient promise that morning light would return to begin another day of the same peaceful routines and gentle connections that had sustained these lands through all the changing seasons of human history, world without end, in the timeless rhythm of communities that had learned the secret of living in harmony with each other and with the natural world that provided the beautiful setting for their ongoing story of friendship and mutual care. Tomorrow, the sun would rise again over the golden woods, and there would be new messages to carry and new opportunities to strengthen the bonds that held their world together in peace. But tonight, there was only the deep satisfaction of work well done and friendships faithfully maintained, and the profound rest that comes to those who know that they have spent their day in service to love rather than fear, to cooperation rather than conflict, to the patient building of the kind of world where such peaceful journeys through autumn woods can continue for generations yet unborn, each one a small but perfect expression of humanity's endless capacity to choose kindness over mere survival, and to find in that choice the true adventure that makes all of life worth living. And all was well in the gentle kingdoms, as it had been for countless seasons past, and as it would be for countless seasons yet to come, world without end, in the soft embrace of autumn stars that kept their ancient watch over sleeping castles and dreaming hearts, until morning light should return once more to begin another day of the same timeless dance between duty and friendship, service and joy, that had always been the true foundation of the peaceful life.